Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast. Today, we have an incredible guest joining us, Kelly Soifer. Kelly is a powerhouse in the world of leadership development, working with an array of clients across industries to shape stronger and more effective leaders. But what sets her apart is her intergenerational work, all the way from baby boomers and older, all the way to Gen Z. These emerging leaders are reshaping the way that we think about work, community, and purpose, and Kelly's here to help us understand that. Kelly brings a unique blend of experience, wisdom, and creativity to her coaching, helping her clients navigate the complexities of leadership in a rapid and changing world. And through her work, she's become a go-to expert on bridging generational gaps and empowering leaders of all ages to thrive. Whether you're a seasoned leader or you're just starting out in your journey, today's conversation is going to be packed with insights that you won't want to miss. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
My goodness. I might use my hype guy wherever I go. Thank you. That was a great intro.
Wonderful. Well, it's great to have you, and I am excited about this. Why don't you tell my audience a little bit about yourself, your journey? How did you get to where you're at today?
Okay. Well, I'll do this as best I can in as short amount as possible. The one thing I guess I would want everyone to know, which I tell people when they meet me, is this: like, I never thought I would end up doing what I'm doing now. I mean, this was not part of the plan, but I also tell students, throw out your plan because it just never tends to unfold that way. I graduated from college with an English degree, thought I was going to get into technical writing and editing. I did that for a couple of years. And I was a volunteer working with this organization called Young Life, working with youth. And after a couple of years, I realized that the technical writing was not waking me up in the morning. It wasn't it was soul killing. And then I loved working with students, and the local Young Life chapter said, we'd like you to think about coming on staff. And I kind of did I didn't feel like the typical Young Life staff worker at that point, who was kind of the cool dude who could do all the board sports, and all the kids thought they were amazing. But I'm really organized, and a lot of people in youth ministry are not very organized. So I ended up sticking around and went to seminary and was on Young Life staff altogether for 11 years and did a lot of work around supervision and starting new stuff and all that. And then church hired me to be a youth pastor, and I did that for 15 years. And that's where I met Scott Anderson.
Yes.
Sorry, I almost called him Scotty because that's who he was when he was in high school. Ended up working with another denomination. And in the midst of all that, I started doing coaching with churches. I, at that point, had been working with youth for 27 years and had really felt like working with youth was very unimaginative, not for me, but what I saw around me. And got pretty frustrated and thought, rather than just focus on doing the work myself, I'll try to get other people equipped, because I just felt like it was not getting better. It was just still pretty terrible. And in 2015, I was working with a church, helping them figure some stuff out. And one of the board members, the elder board, said, you know what we're doing here? I need this at my workplace. Like, I've got this team that is driving me bananas. And I'm like, well, what do you do? And she described what the business was. And I looked at her with spirals of death in my eyes, like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Something in the cloud. It made no sense to me. I had no understanding of what but she was having conflict on her team. And I am familiar with that dynamic. And so she brought me in, and thankfully it went really, really well. And then she said, I'm on the board of a college. I'm going to refer you to them. She referred me to them. And all of a sudden it was like, it just took off.
Wow.
And they referred me to another organization, this international accounting firm. Pinch me. What is going on here? And it just kind of went from there. So now I do primarily coaching outside of a church context. So it's just been really interesting. And I've been in all sectors of the workplace. I work with a tech platform that does data analytics and help them with all their team building, and a nonprofit in New York that helps restore oysters in the harbor. And it's just really fascinating. I love what I do. I could name all the other clients, but I probably shouldn't.
Yeah, and we'll put up links to your website for my listeners. And I saw a lot of those clients, and I was like, wow, this is great. So,
well, it's real diverse. It's been real diverse, real interesting. And then the latest project that totally took me off guard was I got contacted by a company that makes online training videos, and I made a training video that got picked up by LinkedIn Learning. So that got launched in October. And so now I'm making videos, which I'm like, what?
So, Kelly, what are the key values or principles that guide your work?
I think mostly what I want to help people understand is, what does it really mean to be a leader? And, you Google leadership on Amazon and 1,000 book titles come up. I mean, I haven't looked lately, but it's embarrassing how many there are. So there's lots of theories, lots of books, lots of people out there pretending like if you just do these 5 steps, you're a leader and all this kind of stuff. And I just don't, I think there's way too many oversimplified concepts of it, but leadership is a very nuanced, complicated thing to pursue, and it needs to be done, I think, in community. I mean, I think I ended up in leadership because people asked me to lead and not because I decided I was a leader one day. I mean, it kind of started in high school. I was asked to be the captain of my tennis team, and it wasn't because I was the best tennis player. Let's be clear. But I was a leader among my peers, and it kind of went from there. I ended up running my senior prom for the same reason. Kind of goofy. But it just kind of that has been a running theme in my life. I would say if I was walking down the hall with someone and someone said, give me your 1 sentence definition of leadership, and I tend to say that I think that true leaders reproduce more leaders. That's the only quality that I really look for, is whether they are someone who can reproduce leadership in others and not clones of themselves, but they would be able to foster and fan the flame of leadership in other people, although it may look entirely different for that other person.
What do you think are the biggest challenges that leaders face today?
They weren't taught how to lead, so they're leading according to some persona, some celebrity, some famous person, some oligarch, somebody who they're copying, but they don't really know what leadership is, and they haven't really taken any time to think about it. I mean, unfortunately, I think my coaching practice is entirely built on a very simple premise, and that is that no one ever teaches managers how to be managers. So then they just stumble their way through and usually make some pretty significant mistakes that can often be damaging. So I teach people how to be managers. I mean, I'm a middle manager coach. I mean, I do executive coaching, but I really like to actually be right in the middle, kind of helping people who are in their first management experience. And unfortunately, my own competencies were learned. I shaped them around everything I wasn't taught. What I wish I'd known when I started in management. I think that there's just a lack of training. I listen to podcasts like it's my job. So it's weird, always funny for me when I get interviewed for a podcast, because I usually just listen to them. But this one guy, Steve Rogelberg, I think is his name, he does a lot of stuff on one-on-ones, how to do one-on-ones effectively. And he did a really comprehensive study, and it was discovered that literally no one trains their managers how to do one-on-ones. I mean, you think about the billions of dollars that are spent in the workplace getting people to do one-on-ones as part of their management requirement, right? Performance management is crucial. No one's trained on how to do it, so that we're all just fumbling around in the dark.
So you deal with a lot of different industries, a lot of different kinds of leaders. How do you approach coaching leaders from different industries and backgrounds then?
It's interesting. My big secret that I want to share with everyone, especially, again, I'm not vocationally involved with the church anymore, but I wish the church knew this, is that people are desperate, and I cannot say this strongly enough, that people are desperate to have someone to talk to that they can trust. So I just take all of the things I learned over all the years listening to students and apply that in a coaching context. And I just do a lot of listening. I ask questions and show curiosity, and I make it evident that I'm listening by my responses, by the way I just ask further questions. And because usually people's first answer to a question is not actually the real answer, even though they aren't being deceptive. I mean, I just think they give their reflex answer or the superficial answer, and then you have to keep digging. In manufacturing, there's a premise called the 5 whys, WHY, 5 whys, and it's this principle of keep asking questions, to keep digging, to get under something, and to realize what is really the issue at hand. And so I try to practice the 5 whys and just do a lot of listening and reflecting back what I am hearing them say, showing interest, showing curiosity, showing compassion. I think I get away with a lot being female. I think I can just really sit with people, and I love it. I love what I do.
Can you share a success story about your leadership coach? I would love to hear how you made a significant impact on one of your coaching clients.
Boy, I wasn't expecting that question. I mean, I'm thankful to say there are several. I mean, you can see the endorsements on
Absolutely.
my website. I think my brain is just spinning with all the different people. Yeah. So I'll give a larger scale leadership development story in terms of a single client. I ran an intern program for 8 years, and it was to help a faith-based organization bring in younger leaders because they had asked me to come in and coach their leaders. I did that for 2 years. After 2 years, I came back. I'd been to 40 different sites within their organization, and which was a lot of driving in Southern California. I came back and said, I actually like what I see. However, I don't see anyone under 40 in any significant leadership in any of the entities that I visited. You've got a problem. And they're like, well, what should we do? I said, well, you need some younger leaders. So let me go to the store and get some, is the way I said it. And that was to go to colleges and interview young people who were somewhat interested in whatever they were doing and create an intern program. So I started an intern program. Like I said, did that for 8 years. And I just did the stats on this because I'm actually doing another online training course on how to start an internship program. We had 62 interns in those 8 years. And after 8 years, 73% of them were still affiliated with the organization. So the mentoring that was created and fostered, which I had to do a lot of legwork to get those mentors selected and trained and committed and held accountable because they're busy people. The interns themselves to show up, to vet them well, and to train them in the competencies that they needed, and then to fan a flame in them of what their futures could be if they continued with this organization. It worked, and 3/4 of them stuck around. That's an encouragement to me in terms of reproducing leaders.
On the subject of mentoring and coaching, is there a difference of what it means to be a mentor as opposed to be a coach? And if there are those differences, how would you define them?
Yeah, I think those two are pretty different, actually. I think coaching is situational. I think if I have a problem, I don't know what to do in this particular situation, I'm going to go to my supervisor or I'm going to go to someone I trust. But it's about this particular situation that I'm having. I'm having conflict on my team, or I'm having someone underperforming, or I'm having someone who's in a personal crisis and I think they're depressed and I don't know what to do. I get all of those types of things. I will coach someone on how to help them get through that situation. Mentoring is almost like a kind of an Obi-Wan sort of situation. It's sort of this wise sage who has all this experience is available to teach certain truths to someone. It's not based on a particular situation, or that these are the things I've learned along the way that I want to pass along to you. One is kind of, like I said, situational. The other one is more maybe aspirational. Mentoring is interesting. There's the mentor, and then technically the word is mentee. I can't stand that word. It reminds me of manatee. It sounds like manatee. So I just call them the person being mentored. But the person being mentored, I think, should primarily be the one that asks someone to mentor them. As a mentor, I don't go around saying, can I mentor you? I just think that'd be a little creepy sometimes. I mean, not all the time, but I've had mentors who I've asked to mentor me, and I've really, really benefited from that. So I hope that makes sense, the difference between mentoring and coaching.
That does. That was a great way to separate them. I appreciate that. You do a lot of work. I think you called it intergenerationally. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what excites you about doing the intergenerational coaching?
Well, I mean, currently, if the workplace has any size to it, there are 5 generations in the workplace right now, I believe. Let's see. Boomers, Gen X, Millennials, Gen Z, and sometimes what are called the silents, which are like the people in their 70s beyond, our current president, our soon-to-be president. So up to 5. And I've worked with each one of those generations. I happen to be tail end of the boomers. And each generation tends to have some really unique qualities. I mean, if you want to get into the weeds of that, you can read the book Generations by Jean Twenge, Twenge. Interesting last name. And she describes all that. One of the things that's been intriguing to me in this experience, and like I said, I mean, I've mentored, coached, worked with, led all those different generations. And most people say, oh, when someone gets out of college, you know how they're going to be, and they XYZ, and they describe all this stuff. But it's typical. I would just say, and maybe you can help me confirm this because I think you're equally passionate about Gen Z. I think Gen Z is really different from other generations. I'm experiencing stuff with them that I've never experienced before. And it's can be really frustrating to older generations. They are not happy. So I sort of joke that I'm the Gen Z whisperer for these other generations. So, or the anger translator of the older generations to Gen Z who don't understand why so-and-so is mad with them. You know, I mean, like Gen Z doesn't like using email. And I mean, I don't think any of them have ever left a voicemail in their lives. And these are things that older generations rely on, right?
Absolutely.
And why didn't you answer my voicemail? Or why didn't you gave me LOL with an emoji in response to my email, or, stuff like that. And they don't understand why the older generations are mad. So I like to help bridge the gaps, help people understand. I think that we love to talk about empathy, but we don't really understand that empathy is a lot of hard work, because empathy is about learning how to see things from another person's perspective. And that means you've got to get out of your own way in terms of knowing yourself well enough, dealing with your business, and then getting yourself out of the way so that you can actually be present to this other person and see what's going on for them.
I agree. Gen Z is completely different. I love young people and have been working with them my entire adult life as well. Kelly, how do you adapt your leadership coaching methods to connect with Gen Z?
Well, with Gen Z, I think it's about just being present. Like I taught an internship class this year in the spring to 19 and 20, 21-year-olds probably. And just being around them and observing them and using a curriculum that I'd used for 15 years that had worked relatively successfully. It sort of floundered in many ways with this group. So that made me really reflect on like what's not working in terms of the way assignments are given, in terms of giving feedback, making expectations really clear. Things I felt like I didn't have to do quite so much in the past. I have to be much more explanatory, much more patient. I think one of the biggest differences is that this current generation has very little to no work experience. I mean, they've been so busy going to school, surviving the pandemic, all these different things, taking a million activities every summer so that they can qualify to get into colleges and get financial aid and do sports and yada, yada, yada. I think it's only like 22% of students, I think that was the latest study, have had jobs. So employers not only need to teach a new hire from that generation how to work, they need not only teach them the current job at hand, they need to teach them how to work. What does it mean to be timely? What does it mean to dress professionally? What does it mean to communicate? I have coached a client who's 25 on how to use email. This person was unfamiliar with labeling, filtering, that you don't want to use it as a to-do list, that you don't, if you're going to lose things in long threads, so, don't keep it in a thread where it's getting to 12, 16 emails back and forth because you're going to lose the information. I mean, all this kind of stuff.
When you're speaking with managed leaders at different levels, how do you teach them to connect with Gen Z? How do you help them understand these things that you are doing directly with Gen Z and help them know, hey, you've got to do this too?
I mostly want to create empathy because I think they're just so mad at them. They don't even want to learn. So I start with saying like, okay, let's pull the camera back. What has happened in the last 25 years? 9/11, the advent of the iPhone and the expansion of the internet. That was 2004 iPhone, I believe. 2007. 2011 was the like button, I think. And that changed the dynamic, right, of social media. The financial downturn, devastating. A lot of current Gen Zers saw their parents lose their jobs, lose their homes. They started losing trust and faith in institutions. They started having to go through active shooter drills and gun violence on a level unimaginable. All the changes that came up when Trump was first elected in 2016 and just the volatility and division that resulted, the pandemic. I mean, all these things have happened in a very short amount of time. And online learning for a lot of them was devastating, missed graduations and missing and losing friend groups and all that kind of stuff. No wonder they're stressed. No wonder there's anxiety. No wonder there's skepticism and mistrust in institutions. So let's start there. Secondly, the other thing I always like to point out is you get mad that they're just so caught up in their phones and their technology and they seem obsessed with it. And you get, we'll all be the first to admit they know exactly what they want in their Chipotle order, or, they know exactly what they want to order at Starbucks and, all that. So they actually think the world centers around them because they've got a Spotify playlist for everything, right? I mean, they have all these things that is totally customized and caters to them. Who created all that technology? Gen X, older generations. This is our fault. We can't be mad at them. We did it. And we've got to figure out how to reconcile that and learn to accept what has happened as a result and come, like I used the word earlier, come with empathy, come with a desire to understand and with curiosity. So that's where I start. And after that, I've usually got their attention. They're like, I won't say what word they usually say after that, because they realize that this is much bigger than it's not just the transactional interactions they're having. I mean, one fundamental thing we've really, really got to realize and change is that this younger generation really values passive communication. They'd rather text, they'd rather comment, they'd rather use an emoji or a meme. A good number of them don't know how to type because the first interaction with technology was an iPad and then they went straight to cell phones. So a long email, out to the no. I mean, this is not going to happen. Right? They're not going to respond. And if you ask them what they think, they may not tell you because either they don't know or they don't really want to make the energy to talk about it, but they'd rather give you some side eyes and comments somewhere, and then they'll tell their friends what an idiot their boss is. It's a super good time. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, it's complex. There's a lot of layers to it.
So in your interactions with Gen Z, with younger people, what surprised or inspired you about this generation?
They feel things really intensely, and that's not initially sometimes evident because they've become very muted. They've become very guarded a lot of times in the way they present themselves. But I mean, Greta Thunberg basically is changing the world in terms of the climate crisis. There's a young man named David Hogg who was part of the Parkland shootings and is leading a whole political movement. He's now running to be the vice chair of the Democratic Party. He's 23 years old. He's helped elect new members of Congress. So they aren't waiting to be asked to do things. They're kind of saying, you know what, you all kind of messed everything up. We're not looking to you anymore. We're going to go do this ourselves. Now, that's coupled with a whole other part of that generation that do not care at all and are just vaping their way through and video gaming their way through life, and they're numb. And that worries me greatly. So there's both sides of the coin, and both hearten me and discourage me greatly. And I feel a little bit stunned as to what to do.
So you touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to talk about leadership strategies and trends, and you've mentioned some of those already. But how do you define effective leadership in today's fast-changing world? It seems like we're changing faster and more often.
Yeah, I think there has to be opportunities to learn by doing. Propositional teaching doesn't really work because a lot of the technology has changed, situations have changed. There's a very much of a who moved the cheese feeling all the time, although probably only older people like me know what I mean by that saying. But um, thank you. I like using case studies if we are removed from a tactile work environment in the moment. But as much as possible, I encourage managers, give them a leadership opportunity or experience, walk them through it. Don't just kind of hand them a folder and say, go crazy. They're just going to say, they don't even know where to start. One of the things that I'm really concerned about, okay, I'm going to have to reel this back because I tend to rev up and go all the way back and then come forward. But the liberal arts education, right? The liberal arts education is designed not to help you find a career. A liberal arts education is designed to teach you how to develop critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, how to communicate, how to write, right? I mean, it's teaching you how to learn. That's what the liberal art, become an educated person. Well, one of the problems with the internet is that now there's no problem solving. You just Google it, or you're going to just AI it.
Right.
So this generation has not cultivated the ability to stay with a problem over time. They don't know how to sit with something for 4 hours and say, I've just got to noodle on this and figure it out. Like, I Googled it, and when you dig, you find out that was one answer on a Wikipedia page. And you're like, that's not really research.
Right.
But you've got to walk with them through that because they don't even know that that's not research. And unfortunately, I find that professors are not pushing them hard enough. Either they're overworked or they're tired or they're discouraged. So they're not asking that of them or meeting them where they are and then going. Way back earlier in this conversation, you said, what's the principle of leadership that I live by? And my goal is always to meet people on their terms rather than demand that they come to me. I mean, that was the premise of my work with youth for my whole career. And I feel like I learned that from the teachings of Jesus. And that's really important. So if I can meet someone where they are and then help them move forward in their own journey, training and equipping and modeling every step of the way, because that's just not available to them the way it used to be.
I'd like to stay right there for a second and talk about those trends that you just mentioned. How do you see the changing trends shaping the future of leadership development?
Gosh, everywhere. I mean, I think fewer and fewer people are going to go to college because they're not seeing the point, and it's gotten very expensive, like tremendously, painfully expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I think more and more people are going to, one of the things that I said in all my coaching settings during the pandemic is that the pandemic actually didn't create any of the problems that we experienced in the pandemic. It actually just accelerated them. So these things were all coming toward us, and the pandemic sped it up by about 10 years. So the higher education was already kind of disintegrating, and I'm using that word, it's a little over dramatic, but I hope you know what I'm saying. In terms of high cost, what is it delivering? More and more programs like engineering, computer science, nursing are coming out of higher ed, which are vocations, right? And the liberal arts studies, political science, history, English, those are waning dramatically. Whole departments are closing at certain colleges. Colleges are closing by the truckload because they just can't sustain, people aren't staying because, again, like I said, it's too expensive, or they don't see the cost benefit analysis that comes out of that. So I think more and more people are going to get certifications, micro-credentials, and they're going to delay their education or make their education very practical. They're going to, when they need to learn how to be a project manager, they're going to take a Google course on project management. And when they are going to need to learn how to improve their Excel skills, they're going to take an online course through Coursera on Excel. And so they're going to learn all these skills, but they're not going to learn leadership. So there's still this big leadership gap. And leadership, in my opinion, starts with self-awareness. You've got to know who you are. And not only who you are, which you never solve in a day, the journey you enter the rest of your life. I'm still discovering the new things about myself. I find myself fascinating. I'm not kidding. But I have to keep self-examining and learning. What an unexamined life is not worth living. Oh, It's self-awareness and self-management. And then once I'm able to kind of know how I work and learn how to manage that in a way that's appropriate, then I can start leading others. But then I have to lead others by helping them learn how about themselves. So I use psychometric assessments in all my coaching. I happen to use Gallup's StrengthsFinder. That's my favorite, just because I think it's pretty granular and helpful. But there has to be that conversation to get people to understand the way they work. And then the leadership process can start from there.
Yeah, in fact, speaking of Gallup StrengthsFinder, that's one of my favorites as well. And when I went to your website, you actually put your top 5 right there. And as soon as I read those, I knew, okay, this is how Kelly, it's kind of like a cheat sheet.
I'm working with one company that has a fully distributed workforce. There is no office for this company. There's a mailing address, but there's no office. There's no headquarters, right? They are distributed around the world. StrengthsFinder is hugely necessary for them because otherwise there's no casual encounters in the break room. There's no ad hoc lunches or meetings together. There's no happy hours after work. They've got to learn how each other works, and they need those shortcuts that they're not going to get by just seeing each other once a year at a meetup in person. So StrengthsFinder helps them with that, learn how each other works and learn some language about it. And it equips people themselves to talk about how they work. I mean, that's the most valuable part of Strength. That's why I started using it. I started using it with college seniors back in 2009 because I was doing an internship training class then, helping them get ready to launch. And we were doing mock interviews. And, what's the classic first question? Tell me a little bit about yourself. And the students would just be like, I don't know. I think I'm kind of good with people.
Yeah.
And that's not enough. So StrengthsFinder gives you language on how to talk about yourself.
So StrengthsFinder is wonderful. Do you have any other practical steps that leaders can take to improve their communication, especially with younger teams?
Practical applications. Yeah. I mean, another tool actually that I use is the VIA survey, Values in Action, a character survey, which is based on different research than StrengthsFinder. So I think they pair well together. Both of them emerge from positive psychology research, but the VIA is peer-reviewed. It's based on character concepts, ideas, and principles that started way back with the philosophers in Greco-Roman times. And StrengthsFinder is more based on the research of the last, 50, 60 years. So I like having those tools at their disposal. Because again, if the older generations are aware of the way they work and their own idiosyncrasies and can get themselves out of the way and say, I need to be curious. I need to understand what's going on here. I need to meet them where they are. And again, it involves listening. It involves encouragement. It involves conversation. I think younger generations are not so caught up in hierarchy. They don't even like titles, I mean, like I've had to coach young people. This guy wants to be called doctor. Don't call him by his first name. Like, I know it sounds egotistical, but he worked hard to get that degree. Just please call him doctor. The world is pretty flat to them. I think older generations need to understand that. I mean, this generation can DM their favorite musician, their favorite celebrity, their favorite significant figure, and sometimes they'll get a response. They have access in ways that we never did. And older generations got to get off their high horse and understand that the world is changing under their feet, and they can hate it and not like it and say, we just want to do certain things, go back to the way things were. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Things have changed.
Love that. Well, Kelly, how do you continue to grow and develop in your own leadership journey?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, I listen to podcasts like it's my job. So there are too many to list. I probably listen to at least 4 or 5 a day. And I do that when I'm making my breakfast, when I'm brushing my teeth, when I try to exercise. I don't try, I do exercise daily, walk or ride my bike. When I'm making dinner, when I'm doing boring administrative work, logging invoices and stuff like that. But I'm always listening to something, and I'm always reading something. I just downloaded a book by Chip Conley on the midlife because I'm getting a lot of coaching clients who are in this midlife crisis. and trying to figure out, because I mean, work life, we haven't even talked about older generations, but 42 to 52 is kind of a range. And I do a lot of coaching with that age spectrum, because basically they set all these milestones they wanted to reach by their mid 40s, get married, have kids, buy a house, have a career. And then they get to about 45 and they're like, now what? I got to work at least 20, 25 more years. And I don't know what to do. Plus, a lot of times they have to take care of their parents. So, and the pandemic has caused them to become reflective and kind of get existential and say, why am I here? What's my purpose? Which I love having that conversation. So I do a lot of stuff around that. So I'm always I'm always reading something. I'm always listening to podcasts. I subscribe to Harvard Business Review, but I also subscribe to Fast Company, which I describe as Harvard Business Review for millennials and Gen Z. I understand about half of what is being discussed in Fast Company. They'll talk about something on Discord. I mean, I don't use Discord, and it's not like I'm against it. I just, who has time? And I don't understand it, So, but I know it exists. I know it's there. So I'm aware. I listen to podcasts about music, because I want to know what's popular. I love listening to interviews. My favorite thing to read, other than kind of fiction information, I read Generations last year, which is a major commitment. That one I mentioned earlier by Jean Twenge. It's like over 500 pages. That took me a couple of months to read. But when I'm not reading stuff like that, I'm reading memoirs, because I just love learning from people's lives. I just am fascinated by the way different people live their lives and the choices they make. And so, yeah, I'm always trying to grow and change. And then I have a contemplative practice of every morning. I'm reading, journaling, doing a little prayer, trying to get myself centered and grounded so that I can be present to the people I work with.
So do you have a favorite leadership book or memoir, autobiography that has really touched you?
I can talk about formative books. Like, I have listened to one of your podcasts because you guys just kind of connected with me recently. And you mentioned 7 Habits. I hate the title, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The illustrations are super corny because it was written before the internet, before cell phones. That book changed my life. I needed to know how important it was to be proactive rather than reactive. I think I read it when I was 29 or 30. Rocked my world. I still recommend it to clients. I still think it's an amazing book. I think anything by Jim Collins is incredible, whether it's Beyond Entrepreneurship, Good to Great, even the Social Sectors one. I think the monograph he did is really, really good. I had my world rocked in 2022 by 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. The subtitle of that book is Time Management for Mortals, which I totally love, because he basically is saying, like, who do we think we are that we can manage time? Really, people? Right. 1,000 weeks is the concept that the average person's lifespan is 4,000 weeks. How are we going to spend our lives, right? It's not about productivity. It's not about how much I can get done. It's about what I'm not going to get done. He has a to-do and a to-don't list, which I think is brilliant. So, I mean, those are all powerful. I'd say a leadership guru or hero that I acquired early was Sir Ernest Shackleton, who managed this ship in the Antarctic in the early 1900s, right after World War I. It's an amazing story of leadership, and leadership is about perseverance and persistence and treating each person uniquely for what they need. So it's a powerful story. It's powerful. I think it just came out. There's a movie about it now on Disney Plus that I need to watch. But
what's the title of that book?
Endurance, and that was the name of the ship, ironically, that he used to go to try to be the first person to traverse the Antarctic. Explorers used to be a really big deal in our world, right? In the early 1900s, there were places people had not been yet, and it's interesting. There's a book by Edwin Friedman, who's a therapist. Can you tell I was an English major? Titles, books, all this. I'm a total nerd, but it's called Failure of Nerve. And he's like, what we've lost. I mean, think about it. In the 1500s, people would set out to go to some part of the world, not knowing what was going to happen. If the world was flat, they were going to fall off the edge of it. If they were going to travel around some certain continent, would they ever come back? Right? We don't have that anymore. We want guarantees. We want data. We want statistics. We want, Google images. We want there's people taking risks and unknowns. It doesn't happen that way anymore. And that's a leadership that is missing. So I'm kind of fascinated by that concept of what does it mean to lead when you don't know. And you can see that in my StrengthsFinder, because if anyone's familiar with StrengthsFinder, my number one is activator, which means I learn by doing, which is delightful and terrible. It gets me in tons of trouble and it's really fun. But the way I describe it is fire, ready, aim. I just will try something and see if it's going to work. And sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. Kelly, is there a certain takeaway for leaders young and old that you have been teaching lately that you'd like to leave our audience with?
I'll quote something that I stole. I wish I could say I made it up because I like it, but I stole it from somebody, I don't know where, but leaders are thermostats and not thermometers. Leaders should be setting the temperature, not reflecting the temperature. And that's what you want to be looking for. I should be setting the temperature in every meeting that I'm in. I can't ask anyone to do anything I'm not willing to do myself. I'm never too important to not get my hands dirty doing certain things. You're going to have a greater impact coming alongside someone and meeting them where they are and helping them learn along the way and reflect on the journey that they're on, rather than just pontificating from above, loving the sound of your own voice.
I love it. I'm going to steal that one. I'll give you full credit, but I'm stealing it.
You can quote that I quoted someone. How's that?
Oh, yeah, I'll do that. That's great. Secondary sources are wonderful.
Yeah.
So Kelly, how can my audience connect with you? How can they learn more about your work?
I would love it to have anyone engage with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. I'm not a huge fan of social media. I gave up on Facebook a long time ago. I'm kind of on Instagram with some friends, and I love watching cat videos, and I'm not kidding. That's about all I watch on Instagram. I'm a childless cat lady, so let's get that out there. But LinkedIn, to me, that's not social media. It's a professional networking site. I like it. I mean, you're not going to get trolled on LinkedIn because that only makes the other person look bad. So to me, it's a relatively safe place. There's a lot of salespeople out there. Just ignore them, but you can find me there. And then I welcome people to come to my website. I'm in the midst of doing some things with it, so it'll be changing a little bit in the next couple months, but it's KS Leadership Develop. If you just plug that in, you should be able to find it. I'd love to hear from people. Any comments about this conversation would be fun.
And we'll make sure to put all those links in the show notes. So if you're listening, you can find those in the show notes right here. And I would encourage
I'm going
to
to post this podcast on the website. That'll be fun. It'll be fun for me to have.
Lastly, who's one leader that the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast needs to get that could share wisdom with us for a time in the future?
There's a dear friend of mine. His name is Rukshan Fernando. He used to be the provost at Azusa Pacific, and he is now the assistant to the president of the Mennonite Central Committee. He just got back from a 6-week trip visiting a bunch of sites, and it's a world relief organization, and he was just in Zambia, India, Sri Lanka, and Indonesia. And he just said it was a perspective builder. We think we have it hard here in the United States. We have no clue what's going on in the rest of the world. And it was a good reminder to me. So I could obviously connect you with him, but he's easy to find on LinkedIn. He's a hero of mine. He's also a very, very good friend, but he has big thoughts about leadership.
Kelly, it's been wonderful to have you, and I'm going to have you back because I've got a whole slew of questions that I didn't even get to. For my audience, make sure that you check out Kelly and connect with her. And Kelly, I'm excited to connect with leaders, and you are a developer of leaders, and we all need that. Thanks so much for coming on. And to my audience, thanks a lot for tuning in to the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast. See you next time.
Thanks.